Good afternoon, everybody. Mark Stanciolo here from Hyland. I'm going to give it just another minute or so as we are regularly seeing attendees joining the webinar. So we'll be starting momentarily. All right, I think we are going to get started. If Steve Wyant, if you are there, if there's a problem with audio, please feel free to chat me.
Very good.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Absolutely thrilled to be part of this presentation format today. My name is Mark Stanciolo, Director of Global Cloud Sales and Operations for Hyland. I've been with Hyland roughly 15 years. 14 of those have been spent focusing on our hosted solution and deploying on-base applications in our cloud environment. That has slowly grown, obviously, to incorporate all of Hyland's different applications, not just on-base. So as Hyland's repertoire has grown, so has our ability to host those applications in the cloud. Joining me today is Steve Wyant, Senior Solution Engineer and Cloud Business Continuity Manager. Steve, I'll defer to you to introduce yourself.
Hi again, I'm Steve Wyant, as Mark said. I have been working at Hyland for 16 years now, and all of that time spent in the cloud. So hopefully between Mark and I, we can bring you a wealth of knowledge about the Hyland Cloud and cloud in general, as we talk clouds, as cloud has become a very strategic thing for everyone around the world.
Absolutely, thanks, Steve. So we're going to spend our time together today talking about cloud as a strategic imperative. So what we've seen over the last several years is a significant evolution toward not only providers moving toward cloud solutions, but also customers evolving toward a more comfortable level of embracing cloud solutions. Admittedly, 14, 15 years ago, it was a much different environment than it is today in terms of how readily organizations were embracing cloud. And I think what we're seeing now is absolutely a very dramatic shift, because not only are organizations becoming more comfortable with the concept of cloud and their data residing outside of their four walls, but they're being encouraged and almost pushed in that direction by what the industry is doing overall. So to that point, it really is a strategic imperative for organizations to look at cloud for their applications. Excuse me. So as we get into this, I wanted to bring up a few different metrics. So we have done a good amount of research, and we've seen important statistics like this. By 2025, the global data sphere will grow to 163 zettabytes, which is 10 times the data generated in 2016. So we're roughly halfway through that 2016 to 2025 period, and this absolutely resonates. Looking at this through Hyland's lens, we are seeing this amazing growth in content stored in the cloud. This amazing growth of organizations looking to the cloud, because realistically, it is the cloud that's going to be able to handle this kind of growth. Just to put some of that in perspective, you'll see where that zettabyte lies. So years ago, when we first started positioning cloud as an option from Hyland, we were looking at and as our partners were embracing cloud and delivering cloud solutions to our customers, we were looking at the gigabyte realm of this trajectory. A gigabyte slowly evolved into managing terabytes of data, and where we are today within what we're offering and our partners like Navient are bringing to the table, we're talking about petabyte solutions, solutions storing multiple petabytes of data. But you see that there's still room on this continuum before we hit that zettabyte level, and then also that geobyte level down the road here. So in many ways, cloud is still in its infancy. And as I was stating earlier, the only way to really handle this type of data growth is to do so by looking at a cloud-first approach. We and Navient have seen a considerable amount of activity with customers looking to migrate to the cloud, looking to leverage cloud for really any and all of the applications that they have on site. So this really is not a surprise, especially when we look at this next metric where we see 98% of organizations are either actively managing content in the cloud, piloting initiatives, or actively researching. And I know I speak for Steve, I know I speak for Navient, where we say we've seen this evolution move forward at an increasing rate. The level to which organizations were comfortable putting content in the cloud was vastly different 10 or 15 years ago relative to today. And I think this metric here, 98% of organizations, is absolutely going to continue to be that high, if not even tick higher, because from an application standpoint, take content services out of the equation. Just from an industry standpoint and application standpoint, you're seeing this move to the cloud overall. So that really is the driver behind our presentation today, and what we want you to start thinking about as you look toward embracing the cloud moving forward. And in doing so, we want to answer for you or help you build the answers to a couple key questions. So really framed around, how do I make cloud part of my solutions? So in doing so, we're going to explore some sub questions as part of this. The first being, what does cloud first mean, and how can it fit in my strategy? Every organization is different. Every organization has different goals or growth plans around the applications they have in-house, the applications they look to take to the cloud. So what does cloud first mean to you and your organization and your strategy? Secondly, we want to talk to, what does the Hyland Cloud offer as part of a cloud strategy? Having been providing cloud-based solutions for many, many years, we are pretty much the leader in the space. We pioneered the idea of content management in the cloud 15 years ago, and that has evolved to this full suite of content services in the cloud. And we've been joined by partners like Navient in terms of embracing this and building cloud strategies with our customers to help them capture the efficiencies inherent in looking at a cloud solution. And then lastly, we want to talk to, what does a journey to the cloud look like? I mentioned earlier that every organization is different. Every organization has different goals, different drivers, different reasons why a solution hosted in the cloud makes sense for them, provides the right business justification or the value proposition for their particular organization. So we want you to be able to look through the lens of your organization to determine how cloud will make sense moving forward for your organization. So that's really where we're going to be focusing today, on addressing those key points. Talking to being cloud smart, the considerations for the Hyland Cloud, and then leveraging the lessons of those before you. And when we're talking about cloud smart, it's not just about an all or nothing approach to the cloud. It is about looking at your applications individually and then also interdependently to see how making that cloud shift for one application might impact another. So becoming cloud first is not necessarily about just a straight, fast move to the cloud. It's about being cloud smart as part of that journey. So what does it mean to be cloud smart? So you really need to look at this in terms of what makes sense for your organization. Is cloud smart a function of capturing cost control or cost benefits for the organization? Is it about moving to more of an elastic cost base via a SaaS model versus an upfront capital expenditure heavy type of model for purchasing software outright? Is it looking for eliminating the costs associated with resources to refresh your hardware or maintain the administration of that infrastructure? Or is it driven by productivity, looking for enhanced functionality as application vendors today are moving more towards cloud and actually building more comprehensive functionality via a SaaS or a cloud model? Coming from Hyland, that resonates very closely with us because Hyland is on this overall journey toward this multi-tenant SaaS provider beyond the hosting capabilities that we're offering today for our solutions. Is it a function of easier administration for your solutions and increasing productivity as a result of that? Many customers that we've seen take this journey do so as a result of needing more reliability in the solution, needing to take advantage of the disaster recovery or business continuity provisions that a cloud provider offers just as part of its standard offering. Looking at the N+1 redundancy and high availability of a solution to ensure that if your organization actually is impacted by an environmental disaster or something like we're all experiencing today, which is driving the virtual participation in these types of events, COVID-19, are you prepared, and will a cloud solution help prepare you for circumstances like that? I don't think anybody truly imagined the need to shift to a complete remote workforce overnight. And I think organizations are having a little bit of a wake-up call because this is different than looking at this from an environmental disaster standpoint. This was something that I don't know if organizations truly were able to plan for as part of their ultimate planning. Yes, there are elements of pandemic planning that come into play, but I don't know if organizations truly embraced what that could mean until we all experienced what we're experiencing together today. And then lastly, is cloud smart for your organization focused on security? Is it a function of being able to leverage expertise from an external provider around ensuring that the infrastructure is secure in the way that your particular organization's requirements dictate? Having provided solutions in the cloud for a number of different industries, we recognize that there are different needs across healthcare or financial services or insurance, higher education, and being able to implement security that satisfies the needs of any one of those particular industries, it could be a daunting task for an organization. So that could be another reason or another area to be smart in terms of what cloud can bring to your organization. And related to security is that governance and compliance piece. Maintaining specific certifications in a cloud environment is oftentimes made more effective by leveraging a third party, because there are certain economies that can be taken advantage of to satisfy those fairly rigid requirements, whether it is SOC, whether ISO, FedRAMP, whatever it might be. Looking externally at a cloud provider might be an opportunity to help become cloud smart and drive cloud within your organizations. As part of this, it's also about building a roadmap. And it's important to build a roadmap relevant to your solution particularly. So I mentioned I've been with Hyland for 15 years. Prior to Hyland, I spent several years in a management consulting role for retail organizations. So across soft goods, hard goods, etc. And it's interesting because I'm able to take from that experience really what this roadmap means. I was regularly asked, regardless of the customer that we are on site with, well, just tell me, what's Walmart doing? What's Target doing? And it really didn't matter if what Walmart and Target were doing, if it didn't match what that organization needed. So it's important to take a look at your own roadmap. Include all of the solutions that you have, all of the various applications that you have within under your roof to determine whether or not cloud makes sense for all of the applications at once, certain portions of your applications in a predetermined timeline. Whatever that might be, that roadmap needs to be reflective of your organization. And we're also here to look at both public and private clouds. There are different offerings between the two, and there are very key differences and differences in benefits associated with the two. So there's a lot of information out there around the AWSs of the world, Azures of the world, and then the private clouds of the world, like what the Hyland Cloud represents. So it's important as part of that roadmap to look at what type of cloud makes sense for your organization. And looking when you're looking at that, considering cloud native versus cloud enabled functionality. So is the application something that is being built from the ground up with cloud in mind, more of a cloud native, or is it something that's taking existing functionality and enhancing it to make it function seamlessly in the cloud? So those are different considerations that you might want to take a look at as you're building what that cloud roadmap looks like for your organization. Take a look at how do your solutions fit. So can you leverage cloud offerings in only particular areas, or is your organization looking at something that is looking cloud across the board? Can you shorten timelines associated with moving to the cloud by leveraging the services available from Navion? Leveraging a third party to participate in those configuration services, or really looking at that strategy or the implementation services associated with moving to the cloud. Doing so can shorten a timeline and really increase the payback and the ROI associated with moving to the cloud. What solutions are dependent versus interdependent? It might very well make a difference if you look at a particular application going to AWS versus another application, content services, for example, in the Hyland Cloud potentially. How will those be able to speak to each other? What requirements will there be for those applications to be able to speak to each other? So those are the things that need to be considered as well as do you have to do work twice? Typically, when you're talking about migrating a solution from an on-prem instance to the cloud, you might be looking at work associated with the actual migration, and then work associated with an upgrade within that application to take advantage of the latest functionality that might be available. So in your roadmap, does it make sense to look at a migration and an upgrade linearly? Or contrary to what many might think, it actually has some advantages to look at a migration and an upgrade simultaneously. There used to be a school of thought that considered, well, if you do them simultaneously, any troubleshooting that needs to be performed, you may not be able to identify from which effort that issue might be coming from. What we're seeing is actually migrating and upgrading at the same time. We, in conjunction with Navion, are able to really determine where something might be taking place. So we would recommend actually migrating and upgrading at the same time. So looking at your solution holistically, your organization holistically, and looking at what type of cloud makes sense and how you're being cloud smart and building your roadmap, we want this next step to be looking at what the Hyland Cloud offers and how that can satisfy what some of those drivers are. whether it's the cost, the productivity, the reliability, the outsourcing, whatever it might be, let's look at what the Hyland Cloud can offer and see how that addresses the particular needs of your organizations. So from a vision standpoint, I want to focus on realistically this fourth bullet, benefiting from pure and hybrid cloud solutions, business-to-business connectivity, and more frequent releases. So this vision here is what Hyland is bringing to the table as part of our evolution toward this multi-tenant SaaS environment for the Hyland or the Hyland Experience platform. From a cloud standpoint, we're looking at that fourth bullet to be able to take advantage of these hybrid cloud solutions that are repository agnostic, that you can take advantage of the application in the cloud, but at the full level of the Hyland Experience platform, being able to leverage different repositories. So that's really the roadmap for Hyland overall. What I want to do is talk to where we are in terms of the continuum of moving toward the Hyland Experience platform, and talk to specifically what's available right now today from the Hyland Cloud. To define that in detail, we are a mature, proven, privately managed cloud. The hosting platform of choice for the on-base, the content, the brainware, the Hyland suite of applications. Mature from the standpoint that, as I mentioned earlier, we've been doing this for quite some time. We pioneered content services in the cloud, and we are much further along that learning curve than some organizations who might be getting into the cloud today. Proven from the standpoint that we are doing this across all industries. We are satisfying the requirements associated with government or insurance or financial services. So we're satisfying those business pains, and we're satisfying the infrastructure requirements and compliance requirements of what those different industries might require. And then privately managed. And this is where we differentiate the Hyland Cloud from AWS, from Microsoft Azure. So privately managed in that Hyland Cloud Services has nearly 200 resources who eat, sleep, and breathe the administration of the infrastructure upon which 1,200 customers reside. So across network, network, infrastructure, security, compliance, platform development, support, operations, all of those areas are being addressed by this group of resources managing the infrastructure. I mentioned we've been around for quite some time, doing this since 2004. This slide is slightly dated in that we are 60+ million logins monthly, providing services to a little more than 1,200 customers today, managing petabytes of data and billions of documents, all by those experienced, certified resources. And the evidence that we're doing this well is the 98% renewal rate of customers renewing their subscription. So in an on-prem world, that has been measured by renewed maintenance. We measure it in the cloud by renewed subscription. And we take that as a grade A, that we are doing what it is our customers are looking for from a hosted solution. A number of different drivers that we're seeing organizations moving to the Hyland Cloud. I mentioned before those different drivers in terms of being cloud smart, cost, reliability, etc. What we're seeing is that disaster recovery is taking the lead in terms of why organizations are looking to move to the cloud. Organizations might very well recognize they have a business continuity or a disaster recovery program in place. Unfortunately, a number of organizations may not know if what's on paper actually works until they need to put it into place. And I think in light of what the entire world is experiencing right now, and looking at the amount of activity that we're seeing with organizations looking at the cloud, I'm trusting that organizations might be recognizing their preparedness was maybe less than ideal or less than what they had anticipated. So that disaster recovery and business continuity is really that large driver in terms of moving to the cloud. Cost savings are certainly there. There are advantages to looking at solutions via a SaaS model rather than a perpetual one-time purchase. Looking at things from a budgetary cycle, an operating budget cycle rather than a capital cycle. So there are a number of different reasons why we are seeing organizations move to the cloud. And this is where it is about being cloud smart within your organization, is knowing which of these is the driver behind a potential move to the cloud for you. The hallmark of what it is we're providing in the cloud is this concept of managed services. So we built this slide intentionally to mirror what AWS positions out there in terms of the offerings that they provide. And you could certainly go Google it and you'll see a slide that's similar to this, a little different color scheme. But we pride ourselves on limiting what it is the customers are responsible for. So really the customers are responsible for managing the customer data, or what data gets uploaded into the cloud. And then managing the application and the system administration, which many times can be a service that you can have performed on your behalf as well. System administration from Navient would certainly be able to identify and manage a number of those application-related tasks. Beyond that, everything else is managed by cloud services at Hyland. So the encryption of the environment, the encrypted traffic, the business continuity and failover exercises, security, monitoring, patching, and vulnerability management, the security testing and training, data sovereignty regionalization, and risk assessment and policy reviews. All of that represents this managed service that we're bringing to the table as part of the Hyland Cloud. And like I mentioned earlier, you can further streamline that by even taking some of what's at that customer level from a system administration and outsourcing that as well, and taking advantage of a true outsourced managed service for your hosted offering. When you compare this to a public cloud offering, this is where that line of demarcation comes into play. So realistically, there's going to be more responsibility on behalf of the customer, even when a cloud provider is leveraged. That being the difference between SaaS and platform as a service. So think through that as you're looking at what cloud might make sense for you. Just to get into a little bit of detail around what some of those activities are from a managed services standpoint, simple things like the infrastructure setup. Having an outsourced party understand what the infrastructure taxonomy needs to be, whether it is a small handful of licensed solutions, or if it's a large enterprise level solution, the experts within the Hyland Cloud know what that taxonomy needs to look like. They know the difference in infrastructure in terms of number of boxes. It's as simple as that. We're providing the patching associated with that environment, providing timelines for critical and high patches to ensure that they're applied correctly, but also only after being vetted in a non-production environment. 24/7, 365 monitoring of the environment from an intrusion detection standpoint, as well as a bandwidth standpoint, to ensure that periods of peak usage are not being met with any performance drag, but being able to burst and satisfy those periods of peak usage for customers in the cloud. Procurement of any additional infrastructure that might be necessary, scaling horizontally based on the needs of a current solution, and doing so all within the confines of a hosting or a SaaS fee that is not going to that is not going to grow as a result of additional capacity needing to be thrown at the solution in order to avoid performance hiccups. So I don't want to go through all of these in detail because I recognize we have limited time today. Some of the key things that I want to talk to here, though, also upgrades, understanding that in a managed service type of offering, like what we have here with the Hyland Cloud, those upgrades from an infrastructure standpoint being performed on your behalf, realistically leaving only testing to confirm that that upgrade is functioning seamlessly. Talked about disaster recovery already and the criticality of having that and leveraging an outsourced provider for being able to do so. Managing the high availability of the environment. Compliance is huge. Compliance in terms of making sure that your requirements are being met by pointing to the audits and certifications that are being done and performed on your behalf. It's far easier to leverage a SOC 2 audit that's being performed by Hyland Cloud Services than, say, to contract with an outsourced provider to perform a SOC audit on your own environment. Penetration testing, vulnerability scans, and security. Security is absolutely critical when we talk about the types of content that organizations are hosting outside of their four walls. And we're going to go into security in just a moment, and Steve's going to dig deeper into our defense in depth security program. And here we are. So perfect segue, Steve. I will pass the torch to you to talk about security.
Thanks, Mark. I appreciate it. And Mark mentioned a few slides ago that security expertise is definitely a driver for moving to the cloud. And as we look at security, we can look at it, and I could talk to it just about the Hyland security, but if we're looking at this cloud as a strategic initiative and cloud smart, then regardless of the type of cloud we want to go to, we want to make sure that the security that is in place or that we are going to put in place is really going to encompass everything that we need. So there's this concept called defense in depth, which is sometimes called the castle approach, or it's a security approach that security experts use to define their methodology in building a security footprint that really affords you the opportunity to protect many layers of your environment, each independently, so that you can put the most critical information that you have, your data, in the very inside layer. And then from a security perspective, you think about that castle and the medieval castle. To get inside to the middle of the castle, you had to go through all these defenses. You had to get past the trebuchets that are throwing things at you. You had to get over the moat and across the bridge and through the outer wall and then through the inner wall and then through the maze of rooms and stuff to get all the way to the treasure on the inside. And defense in depth concept is the same thing. We've got these areas of expertise, or these areas of consideration that you have to go through. And if you look at the very top layer, policies, procedure, and awareness, security has got to be the #1 mindset. If you are going to go to a SaaS application, if you're going to go to a private cloud, you want to make sure that your private cloud service provider is doing these things. And it has to start with the policies they have in place, the procedures they have in place, and their security awareness, security footprint. So if they're not thinking security first, you should be concerned about the types of security that they're going to be able to implement at the other layers. That top layer really builds the structure of what is going to happen at every other layer underneath. If you are going to a public cloud, you've got to remember that these things, some of these things, many of these things, become your responsibility. In a public cloud, you get maybe the physical infrastructure that the data center provider is giving you, the public cloud's giving you, and maybe even some of the perimeter stuff, but how you build your internal network and how you build your hosts and how you deploy your application, those still become your responsibility. So understanding how to use the security for a public cloud is immensely important. If you look in history, some of the most recent breaches, one of the biggest ones, the Equifax breach, happened in Amazon's cloud. And it wasn't Amazon's cloud that had a security flaw. It was how Equifax implemented security in that cloud. So the tools were there, they just didn't implement them properly. So knowing how to do that is immensely important. And that's why a lot of people move to private clouds and SaaS offerings, because the security personnel there have trained expertise in how to secure this information in these cloud environments. But if you look at these layers, physical layer we talk about is the building and the physical data center and the cage that all of the racked amount of equipment it lives inside of. Does the data center have armed security guards? Is there access control lists for entry? You know, is entry restricted? Is the data center in a relatively safe location from natural disasters like floods? Is it in a physical location that's hard to identify? Or is there a big gigantic sign outside that says, hey, I am a data center, come steal stuff from me? And then, you know, inside you have things like multi-factor authentication to get into the physical data center. Do they have armed guards? Do they have fire suppression and battery backup and generators for power? Some things we don't think about is, you know, fire suppression and backup power are security related things. If power goes out and the electronic locks on the outside of the doors no longer function, are the doors open? So having backup electricity to those doors is essential, especially if, you know, the unlock or the lack of power position is unlocked. So knowing those things is immensely important. And as you build from layer to layer, the key features here is each layer is independent of the other layers. So the things I implement, let's say the host layer, are all done at the host layer. I'm not relying upon something at the network layer, at the perimeter layer to provide security at the host layer. They have to be independent. That way there isn't a quick path or a one or two vulnerabilities that let you penetrate the entire defense in depth layered system to get into the data layer in the middle. And then we have to make sure that our policies, procedures, and our awareness are doing what's best in class at these layers. Like in the perimeter layer where we have things like next generation firewalls, are we implementing things like a web application firewall and deep packet scanning and intrusion detection and prevention and denial of service attack prevention? So making sure that each layer, the best in class things that can be implemented at that layer are being done. Clear down to the data layer. You know, even the data layer, things that we may take for granted, like data, encryption of data at rest. Is the SaaS provider doing those things appropriately? Do they have good security at the data layer and the application layer and everything above it as well? So this is definitely an area you want to focus on. It may not be the primary driver to come to the cloud, but it's certainly a driver, and it is certainly something that as you look at SaaS providers or private cloud providers, are they doing these things? And if you're going to go to a public cloud, are you able to do all of these things? Do you have the security expertise to do so? So with that, we're going to move on to where you can look in an organization around what are they doing from a security perspective. So Mark's going to take over and talk about audit assurance and how these things may help you figure out what security footprint a private cloud or a SaaS offering has.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Steve. And just for everyone participating, please know that that one slide that Steve just talked through is actually a presentation in and of itself. And what we're seeing is organizations who are looking at moving to the cloud, they might have a number of security related constituents internally that need to be satisfied with very specific questions. So we're more than happy to help facilitate that type of additional detail if it's something that you would be interested in pursuing. But as Steve mentioned, there are different areas of assurance, compliance that come into play to evaluate whether or not an organization is actually adhering to those security protocols that Steve just walked through. So in the case of Hyland Cloud Services, we perform all of our security, everything according to a set of policies that are built upon ISO HIPAA, and NIST guidelines. So we're able to demonstrate where, in the event that there might be a unique certification that is not provided, because of the policies that we adhere to, we're usually able to demonstrate compensating controls to satisfy something that might not be listed specifically. And I just noticed a typo in that slide, so I'm going to move forward. I apologize. But from a compliance standpoint, this is what is on the table currently with the Hyland Cloud. So an annual SOC 2 audit that is available to customers by request every year that it is compiled into a report. ISO 27001 certification, that ISO certificate can certainly be provided upon request. Compliant with GDPR principles, NIST compliance, and PCI compliance. NIST and PCI are the latest and greatest with what's currently being offered by the Hyland Cloud. We are able to attest to NIST 853 controls, as well as provide the certificate of compliance for PCI in one of our data centers in the United States. So this by no means is a static list. Our focus on compliance is evolving to address the needs of the market overall, the needs of what our customers and what customers are saying are required. Case in point, PCI compliance is the result of a customer requiring that internally and needing the environment to evolve to be able to satisfy that. So this is under review regularly. From a data center standpoint, we only leverage tier 4 hosting facilities in practice. By policy, it's tier 3 or higher. All data centers are ISO 27001 certified and SOC 1 and 3 or SOC 2 audited. As I mentioned with Hyland's audits, we can deliver those reports. We can deliver these reports to you upon request as well. And speaking of that data center footprint, so this has been a very fun ride to be on, because just within the last 10 years, we have grown from 2 data centers in the United States to 13 data centers globally. So now offering 4 data centers in the US, our legacy footprint being AT&T facilities, now Evoke in Ashburn, Virginia, and replicating to Bluebridge Networks in Cleveland, Ohio. All of our net new hosted customers are going into a data center pairing that is an Iron Mountain facility in Pittsburgh, replicating to an Iron Mountain facility in Kansas City. Now keep in mind, they're co-located facilities, so while we're leveraging the provider for the physical controls, the environmental controls like fire suppression, power redundancy, air cooling, etc., Hyland owns and manages remotely all of the equipment within those data centers. Now what this slide does not represent, well, it does now based on some of these additions, is our growing presence in other areas of the world. So you notice a new flag planted in the EU. We are looking forward to a co-located facility in Frankfurt, Germany, come October 31st of this year to satisfy concerns associated with EU organizations in the face of Brexit. And then the other 2 flags here, the one being the additional on the west coast of the United States and the one in Tokyo or in Japan, are a function of our growing relationship with AWS. So we are looking to explore AWS in regions where we don't have a co-located facility, or where an additional facility is required that a co-located facility would not satisfy the needs for. So it is an opportunity to look at those facilities when necessary, but typically if there's a co-located facility in the region, we'll be leveraging that. The point being that this is not static, and we are regularly reviewing the environment overall to determine where another location might be necessary. Across that data center footprint, every customer is provided 3 copies of content, 2 copies in the primary facility with a 3rd copy in that replicated site. So in the event that there is a performance issue within that primary facility, Hyland Cloud Services can fail over automatically, transparently to the customer. In the event that there's a larger environmental disaster, that 3rd copy can come into play and the primary facility can be restored directly from that secondary facility. Now, depending on the services that are available, it's based on the hosted service level that a customer pursues. So at Double Platinum, organizations would not wait the restoration of the primary facility from that secondary site. Rather, they would be failed over automatically and they would begin retrieving, processing, accessing content directly out of that secondary data center. At the platinum, gold, and silver levels, customers would await the restoration of that primary facility. And looking at that protocol, you'll see different commitments here. So at Double Platinum, we're providing an SLA uptime of 99.9%. And business continuity commitments of 1-hour RPO and 4-hour RTO. But I want to qualify, those commitments are simply the threshold upon which financial remedies would come into play. So by no means are we saying that even at the top level, Double Platinum, we're only available 99.9% of the time. Since our inception 15, 16 years ago, we've been operating at 99.99% availability. Disaster recovery is something that Steve alluded to, as well as I did a little earlier. We have a full-blown disaster recovery program for our hosted customers, ranging from annual evaluations in each data center to actual tests performed on actual systems and multi-solution tests measuring the efficacy of the DR protocol across multiple solutions at one time. And then, of course, all customers have the ability to commission their own audit, a failover test of the environment. And I got my words mixed up there for a moment, I apologize. All customers are able to request an audit of the environment and leveraging a 3rd party to audit the environment. Customers at the platinum and double platinum level can actually request a formal failover test of their particular solution. So we want to make sure that customers recognize that everything that is being said is done is actually being performed. And I want to close our session today. I know we just have a few more minutes or so, but I wanted to talk about the process associated with taking your on-prem solution and looking at, does it make sense in the cloud? If so, what would the next steps be and what things would need to be taken into consideration? So from a solution standpoint, it would be important to look at your solution to determine, A, is your on-prem solution on Oracle versus SQL? An on-prem solution on Oracle would require a conversion to SQL before a migration to the cloud could take place. But other elements of the solution would require more evaluation and more configuration considerations that Navient could work with you on, from in the encryption of the environment, single sign-on, leveraging Hyland's IDP, looking at whether or not external autofill keyword sets are used, and if so, what would need to be changed in order to accommodate that. All of these areas would be worth exploring with Navient to determine what would need to be performed differently for your particular solution. Reporting is a great example that customers like to look at, because there is a difference in terms of accessibility to the database in a hosted solution rather than on-prem. So there are some different levels of access that we're granting in terms of being able to get to some of the data absent the access to the database, whether that is reporting through reporting dashboards or regular extracts of the database for Navient or for you to build reports against. we recognize that in some of these cases, there are some cultural shifts associated with migrating to the cloud, but you have resources at your disposal to be able to mitigate those and work through them seamlessly. From a financial standpoint, we in Navion absolutely want to work with you in arriving at what that ROI or that payback would be for migrating to the cloud. So there are tools available by which we can estimate what the cost of the on-prem solution is, and then measure what that looks like compared to a SaaS fee in the cloud moving forward. We take a look at items from the software standpoint of the infrastructure, the SQL licenses, etc., to the actual hardware expenses, the file storage, the high availability and DR components, as well as the resources necessary to manage all of those elements. And what we're seeing, and we want to help you arrive at, is the costs that can be saved by leveraging a solution via a SaaS model in the cloud. But more importantly, we do not want to simply tell you what that ROI might look like. We want you to be an integral part of identifying what that value proposition is. So we want to work in hand and look at the assumptions that we're leveraging to build what that payback is, and make sure those assumptions align with what your internal organization sees, from the compensation for resources responsible for managing the environment to the costs associated with refreshing that hardware on a 4 or 5 or 6 year basis. We want to make sure that you understand what those assumptions are, so that ROI is actually rooted in full disclosure. I want to close out here and turn it back to Steve to talk a little bit about the journeys we've seen with customers migrating to the cloud across different industries, across these different personas. And after that, we'll leave you with some next steps about how to contact us moving forward. So Steve, take it away.
Yeah, Mark, thanks. As Mark is going to close us out with some next steps, one of those things is a discovery session with Navient and Hyland. And during that discovery session is where we can talk about some of these cloud journeys. And what we've done is, this slide kind of personifies a couple of key cloud journeys we've seen in the past, where these personas actually were real customers that migrated to the cloud, and we have generated a bunch of lessons learned, successes and challenges that these cloud journeys experienced along the way. And during our discovery session, we can bring these successes and challenges to the table to sit and talk about them and figure out how they relate to you. So like in this case, our scholar is a higher education customer, our trusted advisor is a financial services customer, the healer was a healthcare customer, the counselor was an insurance customer. And these all have different challenges, different successes, different things that happened along the way. So we're using these cloud journeys to help each of you figure out what a cloud journey might look like for you. So if you take a look at the journey and the successes that go along with that journey, in all 4 of cases, the #1 key component we have found to success was planning. Planning by far can't be understated, it's got to be the most critical, key, important thing. Even though all these journeys were different, they had different software involved, they had different integrations involved, they had different challenges along the way. Planning was the key to their success. So when we talk about our discovery session later, when we talk about getting together with Navient and figuring out what migration looks like, that is the beginning of this planning phase. And it's so important to make sure that planning is the fundamental thing we're focusing on as we talk about a migration to the cloud. And even if you're moving to a public cloud, planning is going to be key essential to getting there successfully, with the challenges being able to be accomplished and overcome, and part of the success actually of moving to the cloud. And that discovery process is really the beginning, where we're going to learn what your solution looks like today, where you might see a challenge, where you might see something that has to be worked on. And then we talk about successes. We have successes in a variety of areas, whether We had one customer that was bringing in exorbitant amount of data. So HL7 and SFTP was a success for them because they figured out how to use those tools to bring in as much as a terabyte of data in a week period through some of these ingestion tools. And other products in the Hyland portfolio, like in OnBase, we've got WorkView, which is starting to become a product that is really getting traction in the industry. And how do we make sure that the WorkView and integration components in our OnBase systems and our content systems are being able to be migrated to the cloud successfully, making sure that encryption becomes part of that tool set that we're doing when we move to the cloud, and overcoming challenges like a different database platform. If you're running on an Oracle or some other database platform that's not SQL Server, when you move to the cloud, we got to figure out how to do a conversion for that, how to do an upgrade along the way. Mark talked about that earlier, and it is such a time saving, it's such a benefit if we can accomplish that as part of the migration, but it needs to end up in our plan. It's got to be one of those challenges that we put on our list and ask ourselves, how are we going to make sure that we're successful when we upgrade and migrate at the same time? And then making sure things like administration are covered, that we know the difference between this is what our solution looks like when we're running it in our own network. What is it going to look like? And how am I going to administer that when I move to the cloud? So as we look at these successes and these challenges, this discovery phase, this discovery offering that we're doing with Navient and Hyland to come out and work with you to figure out what your plan looks like, it's going to be essential to take a look at these journeys, the ones that were successful already, and find some parallels.
Thanks, Steve. I think that hits on a lot of areas that customers do have top of mind when they're looking at pursuing a migration to the cloud. So we are just about up on time. I wanted to end this with a quote that really resonates with me from Mark Benioff from Salesforce. The world is being reshaped by the convergence of social, mobile, cloud, big data, community, and other powerful forces. The combination of these technologies unlocks an incredible opportunity to connect everything together in a new way and is dramatically transforming the way we live and work. And I think that is incredibly relevant today as we see this shift from on-prem to cloud-based SaaS solutions and the opportunity that's available to customers to leverage functionality born in a SaaS model and being able to leverage integrations with other applications in a SaaS model as well as on-prem. The opportunity here is absolutely significant. I do hope that we were able to satisfy some of the objectives that we put forth today in terms of becoming cloud smart, understanding what Hyland Cloud has to offer for you. And then this last piece, letting you know that there is a discovery program available for you to work with Navient and Hyland to walk through your solution, determine what type of effort the migration would be, and identify the benefits associated with that migration. Feel free to reach out to Navient to put that in motion. Again, I want to thank you very much for your time. My contact information is on here as well if you had any random questions from the presentation today. But reach out to Navient and look forward to having an opportunity to talk sometime in the near future. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.